Greetings all, it's February 5th, 2023. I'm speaking quietly here today because it's very early, and I also have a bit of a cold, so pardon my voice. I woke today thinking about sharing my experience on a topic I haven't talked about here before, and that is crystals. I went through a period of a number of years, commencing somewhere around 2014, I believe, where I was absolutely fascinated with crystals. And I spent a lot of time studying crystals, their characteristics and qualities, their applications, in other words, what they could be used for. And as usual with me, I went into it very deeply. I ended up even ordering from suppliers in far-flung parts of the world, like Brazil and Asia and things like that. And I also ended up getting my hands on a lot of fairly exotic crystals, some of which, if I recall correctly, aren't even covered in the main books about crystals. And I really admired these stones, and I took very good care of them and treated them as if they were precious, because to me they were. I also made bracelets and necklaces for various purposes, and I often would set my intentions with different crystals, where you program the crystals with your intentions so that they will embody and hold those energies. It could be anything from abundance to protection. I actually had a particular interest in stones that were good for grounding and energetic protection. There are still a few that I carry with me every day. That would be over 10 years. And it was an absolutely fascinating journey and experience. I also did crystal grids and set my intentions with them, which is where you make arrangements of crystals and leave them set up in your residence typically to hold certain energies or intentions. Back then, pretty much every day, I would meditate with various crystals. I would often lie down and place crystals on one of my chakras. Could be my third eye chakra, my heart chakra, and I would try and get into a state where I would be able to communicate with the crystal in question. I wanted to connect with them and find out what their purpose was, what their nature was, and to see what, if anything, I could learn from them. And I had many intense experiences when doing this. There weren't really any other people in my circle at the time who were into it to the same degree I was. So it was kind of a solitary journey for me. I also took advantage of full moons and sunlight to cleanse crystals and recharge them. And because my collection was quite large, that was not a trivial undertaking. Some crystals cannot be exposed to sunlight or they will fade. Others, it doesn't matter, so you kind of have to know what you're doing. I would also take crystals and put them through a cleansing process often before I would work with them. Sometimes it would take weeks to cleanse energies from crystals, to purify them. And I would do that based on my guidance or intuition. There were a number of cases where I had to literally get rid of certain crystals, often ones that came from a particular store in the city where I lived. They did not have good energies, and they were too difficult for me to reckon with easily, and I was concerned about them contaminating me or my environment or my other crystals. And so in some cases, I would actually dispose of them in a way that wouldn't harm the crystal, but that would keep it out of reach of other people for a very long period of time. I actually came to think that some of the people at that particular store were engaged in black magic. I got very sensitive to crystals, and there was one shop that was absolutely fabulous. The owner was very skilled and actually taught courses on the subject and very intuitive in a kind of shamanistic way. And she had a fabulous store. And I would just go there and sometimes, I would pick up certain stones that I was attracted to. And then she would say to me, "Oh, you're very sensitive because I know that stone." And we would talk about it. She had some stunningly beautiful examples that were very carefully picked. And you could spend a fortune there in very short order. So I only went there occasionally, as my budget permitted. A dramatic example was the first time I held moldavite, which is a stone that is considered to be extraterrestrial from a meteorite impact in the Czech Republic. And, there's a lot of fake moldavite out there, a lot. Most of it, in fact, probably is fake. But if you're sensitive, you can tell the real stuff from the fake stuff by its energy. So the first time I held moldavite, my legs literally got weak and almost buckled. It was so powerful, the energy of the stone. And so I ended up with a few nice pieces of moldavite, and it is extremely potent and powerful. Some people can't handle it. It's too intense. That wasn't necessarily the most powerful experience I've had with crystals. It was just the one that my physical body reacted to very intensely. I actually have quite a few tektites and meteorites and things like that, which are of extraterrestrial origin. And I was always fascinated by those kinds of things. And some of my most beloved would be like Lemurian record keepers, beautiful, clear points that are a good size. There were countless times when I would just be out perusing what was new in the shops, and I would come across something that really struck me. And I didn't always purchase it on the spot because sometimes they're a bit expensive. And then I would go home and that stone or crystal, and I'm using those words interchangeably, that stone or crystal would just stick in my head, like I couldn't get it out of my head. And then within a day or two, I would have to go back and get it because I knew, and I'm getting chills saying this right now, I knew it was calling me and that I had to have it. Very, like, you can't make that up. That happened many times. It's funny how that works. You need that energy, or that stone could be helpful to you, or it just wants to be with you. It's amazing. I'm still getting strong energy saying that. So I had a great reverence for crystals. Like I really love them. And I was kind of surprised that other people didn't appreciate them as much as I did. I had several, and still do, very large pieces of selenite, which is a very cleansing and purifying stone. It's got such a high vibrational energy. It's absolutely lovely. I'm actually getting chills talking about it. But these pieces are 2 or 3 feet long and big chunky pieces. And I have them around the perimeter of my apartment. Actually, a lot of my resources on this topic are still in Ontario. And that's one of the reasons I haven't really worked with them very much is when I came out here prior to the pandemic, it's not something that you can travel with. The conclusion I came to after working with crystals so intensely for so long was that crystals have devas in the same way that devas exist in the natural kingdom, where a species of trees has kind of an oversoul. Humans have an individual soul, but plant species have one soul for the whole species. So all oaks are members of that soul. And the term for that is deva, Deva. And my conclusion with crystals was that it's the same thing. Crystals definitely have consciousness, but they have a deva for each crystal or species of crystal. as it were. Also, a conclusion I came to, which I haven't heard expressed much elsewhere, if anywhere at all, actually, is that crystals have consciousness, but they live in a different time span than we do. Some of them may literally be millions of years old. And so their frequency is very different from humans because we're very much in this moment, but their time span of life can literally be millions of years. So that is one of the reasons we can't necessarily communicate with them in the same way that I can communicate with you, is because their lifespan is vastly different from ours. As I said, I have a tremendous amount of reverence and respect for them. I had many beautiful experiences and enlightening experiences working with them, and healing as well, of course. I was also really fascinated by that whole trend, and it was a trend, about the timing of it, like why suddenly so many people were really interested in crystals. It's not quite as much of a trend as it used to be. There's still people really into it. But I think the fact that this occurred around that time, 2012 and everything, I think that in itself is kind of telling and a part of this major shift in consciousness that we're going through. And again, I still carry certain crystals with me every day. And once in a while, I will wear other ones depending on my mood. What kind of brought that phase to a close for me, though, is this. And it's something you don't hear people talk about much. I was talking to a supplier in a country I won't name, and we were doing a video call, and he was surrounded by a lot of large crystals in kind of like a warehouse. And I was shocked by the way they were handling the crystals without respect or care. I was really shocked because to me, if I was going to spend a lot of money on a crystal, I wanted it to be in pristine condition. But they were handling them very roughly and disrespectfully. And that really bothered me. And then I started to think further about how many of these crystals were actually acquired in the wild or mined. And a lot of the people who are collecting them and distributing them are doing it just for the money. I mean, collecting them in the field. And that was kind of a heartbreaking realization for me. I don't know why, I just hadn't thought about it much before. Because I think that they're precious and they're real gifts. And they should be treated with reverence and respect. But clearly that was not happening. And so it took a little bit of time for me to ultimately kind of wind down my obsession. But I did, unfortunately, because I didn't want to support that kind of activity. For a lot of the people who are collecting these in the field, it's just a commercial enterprise, and they don't even really understand what they're doing. And I presume a lot of crystals are damaged when they are being mined. And they're just treated as if they're any other commodity, but they're not. They're actual life forms. And so I couldn't reconcile that with my own interest in the subject. And I basically stopped collecting not long after. So that's my crystal story. If you're going to get into it, there are some really good books on the topic. There's a lot of bad books on the topic. Feel the energy of them before you buy them. Be sensitive to that. Don't just go based on looks, because often a lot of the most powerful crystals are not necessarily the prettiest ones. A lot of the rolled and polished stones that you see are just mass-produced or tumbled to polish them in machines. I always favored natural crystals in natural formations, ones that had not been cut polished or modified. To me, they had the most life energy in them, but they tend to be more expensive. You can spend a lot of money on really high quality crystals. Yeah, for bracelets and jewelry and things like that, polished stones and stuff are fine. And they definitely still have the energy of the stone. It takes a lot more energy to find specimens that are in their natural state that are really beautiful without damaging them. If you go to the shows, the crystal shows where people set up booths, you can find some really amazing specimens because the real collectors know what they're doing. You just want to make sure also that their means of mining aren't unethical. So it can get a bit tricky. So just be aware, there's a lot of fraud. Like, for example, most citrine isn't citrine, it's heated amethyst. Real citrine is expensive and hard to find. I wouldn't put photos of my crystals on the internet for obvious reasons, because I'm very protective of them. Anyway, I thought I'd share that with you. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.